Amelia Carter had grown accustomed to sleepless nights, but this one felt different. The city outside her window was shrouded in silence, the kind that seemed too still for comfort. Her phone buzzed, slicing through the quiet like scalpel. The screen glowed with an unknown number. She hesitated, a frown creasing her brow, before answering. "Dr. Carter." The voice was familiar, but she couldn't place it. It was rough, almost desperate. "I need you. It's Lily. She's in trouble." "Who is this?" Amelia's pulse quickened, her mind racing through the faces of patients and parents she had seen over the years. "Please come to the old community center. You promised." The call cut off. Amelia stared at the phone, her heart pounding in her chest. A promise. The word hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. She had made many promises in her career, especially not recently. But something about the voice tugged at a long-buried memory. Against her better judgment, she grabbed her coat and keys. The rational part of her mind told her to stay put, to ignore this strange call and go back to bed. But a nagging voice whispered from the depths of her past, a voice she hadn't heard in years. It was the voice of a promise she had broken. The drive through the desolate streets was eerie. The once bustling neighborhood had decayed over the years, now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. As Amelia pulled up to the crumbling building, a sense of dread settled over her. The old community center, long abandoned, stood like a monument to forgotten promises. Her breath misted in the cold night air as she stepped out of the car. The silence pressed down on her, thick and suffocating. She approached the building, its windows boarded up and the walls covered in graffiti. She hesitated for a moment, questioning whether this was the right decision. The door creaked open before she could knock, and a figure stood in the shadows, illuminated only by the flickering streetlight. "Dr. Carter, you came." Amelia's breath caught in her throat as recognition washed over her. Elena, the mother of the boy she had failed to save all those years ago. The old community center smelled of mildew and decay, a reminder of the years it had been left to rot. Amelia followed Elena inside, her footsteps echoing against the cracked tiles. The air was thick with dust, and every step stirred the memories she had tried to bury for so long. "Why did you call me?" Amelia's voice was strained, her eyes scanning the dark corners of the room. "What's happening to Lily?" Elena didn't answer at first. She stood with her back to Amelia, her shoulders tense, as if holding the weight of the world. When she finally spoke, her voice was brittle, laced with years of anger and grief. "Lily is dying, just like you let my son die." The words hit Amelia like a punch to the gut. She staggered, her hands trembling. It had been years since that day, but the guilt had never left her. She had done everything she could, but in the end, it wasn't enough. She had promised Elena that her son would survive, but he hadn't. I'm sorry," Amelia whispered, her throat tight. "I did everything I could." Elena turned around, her eyes hard as stone. "Sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't save Lily." Amelia swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen Elena like this before, not even at the funeral. Back then, she had been broken hollow, but now she was filled with something darker, anger, maybe even hatred. "What's wrong with Lily?" Amelia asked, trying to shift the conversation to something she could handle, something she could fix. Elena's expression didn't soften. "She's been sick for weeks. The doctors don't know what it is, but I do. It's the same thing that took him." Amelia's blood ran cold. Could it really be the same illness? The one she hadn't been able to diagnose? The one that had stolen Elena's son from her? She had never found out what had killed him, and it had haunted her ever since. "I need to see her," Amelia said, her voice steadier now. "I need to examine her." Elena hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "If you fail her like you failed him, I won't." Amelia's voice was firm, though inside she wasn't so sure. Elena led her down a narrow hallway to a small room at the back of the building. The door creaked open, revealing a small figure lying on a makeshift bed. Lily. Her pale face was barely visible in the dim light, her breathing shallow and labored. Amelia knelt beside the girl, her medical instincts taking over. She pressed her fingers to Lily's wrist, checking her pulse. It was weak, erratic. She lifted Lily's eyelids, noting the glassy look in her eyes. Her skin was clammy, and there was a faint blue tint around her lips. "Lily," Amelia whispered. The weight of the past threatened to suffocate her, but she pushed it aside. There was no room for hesitation now, not with a life on the line. She turned to Elena. "I need supplies. A proper medical kit, oxygen." Elena shook her head. "There's nothing here. You'll have to work with what you've got." Amelia felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She had hoped for more, but she would have to make do. She couldn't fail again. Not this time. The room was silent, except for the shallow rasp of Lily's breathing. Amelia worked quickly, her mind racing through possibilities. Without the right equipment, her hands felt tied, but she couldn't afford to show weakness, not in front of Elena. Not when the stakes were so high. "What do you think is wrong with her?" Elena's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and accusatory. Amelia hesitated, carefully lifting Lily's arm to examine her skin. Bruises had formed on the girl's limbs, some fresh, some fading, but all too similar to what she had seen before. Her mind flashed back to Elena's son. He had shown the same signs in his final days. The same symptoms. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. "I'm not sure yet. I need more information," Amelia replied, trying to keep her voice steady, though a gnawing fear had already started to take root. "But I need you to trust me." Elena's laugh was bitter. "Trust you? You promised me before, and look where that got us." Amelia flinched, but kept her hands steady. She couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. "Not again. I'm doing everything I can, Elena. I'm not giving up on her." Elena's eyes flashed with fury, her fists clenched at her sides. "You didn't give up on him either, did you? But he still died. What makes you think this time will be any different?" The weight of the accusation hung in the air. Amelia didn't have an answer, not one that would satisfy Elena's grief or her own guilt. She had made a promise once, and it had been shattered. Now, here she was, standing on the edge of another broken vow, her heart pounding with the fear of repeating the past. "I know you don't believe me," Amelia whispered, her throat tight, "but I'm going to try. That's all I can do." Elena stared at her for a long moment, the silence between them heavy with unspoken pain. Finally, she stepped back, crossing her arms over her chest. "Just don't fail her like you failed him," Elena muttered, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. Amelia nodded, though her chest tightened with the impossible weight of expectation. She couldn't afford to fail. Not again. Amelia knelt beside Lily, carefully tilting the girl's head to check her airway. The minutes were ticking by, each one a reminder of how little time they had. Every second that passed made the task of saving her more daunting. Without proper tools or resources, Amelia was fighting an uphill battle, and she could feel the clock running out. "I need you to keep her head elevated," Amelia instructed Elena, who reluctantly complied, though her eyes remained hard and cold. "Will that help her?" Elena asked, her voice edged with skepticism. "It will help keep her airway open," Amelia replied, already scanning the room for anything that could assist her. "I need to keep her stable until I can figure out what's going on." The room was sparse, with nothing that resembled medical equipment in sight. Amelia's mind raced. She needed to act fast. There was no room for hesitation. She checked Lily's pulse again. It was weak, faltering, the same way it had been with Elena's son. The similarities between the cases were unsettling. "Elena," Amelia said, standing up abruptly, "I need to know everything. Has Lily been sick for a long time? What exactly has she been experiencing?" Elena's face hardened, but she spoke nonetheless. "She's been sick for weeks. Fevers, fatigue, bruises. The doctor said it might be a virus, but nothing helped. And then she got worse." Amelia listened intently, piecing together the puzzle. Bruises, weakness, erratic breathing. These were the same symptoms that had plagued Elena's son. And just like then, there were no answers, no diagnosis. She'll die, won't she? Elena's voice cracked, but the hardness in her gaze remained. Amelia looked at Lily's frail body, her own hands trembling slightly. I don't know, but I'm not giving up. Like you didn't give up on him. Elena's words were like a knife, cutting through Amelia's determination. I won't fail her, Amelia said softly, more to herself than to Elena. But the weight of the past hung heavy in the room, and no matter how much she wanted to believe she could make things right, the doubt lingered. Lily stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for the briefest moment. Amelia leaned forward, her heart pounding. Lily, can you hear me? The girl's lips parted, a faint murmur escaping them, but the words were incoherent, lost in the haze of her illness. Amelia's mind whirled. She needed more than just her hands and hope. She needed a solution, something that would pull Lily back from the brink. But without the right tools, without the right environment, how could she possibly do that? The thought sent a chill down her spine. Elena, I need to get her out of here, Amelia said firmly. This place isn't safe. She needs to be in a hospital. No, Elena snapped. We're not going anywhere. The doctors in the hospital didn't help her. I won't let them touch her again. Amelia stared at her, incredulous. You think keeping her here will save her? She needs medical care. She needs you to do your job, Elena interrupted, her voice rising in anger. You owe me that much. Amelia's jaw clenched. There was no reasoning with Elena in this state. She was locked in her grief, unable to see past the anger. And Amelia couldn't blame her. She had failed once before, but Lily couldn't be a victim of that failure. She knelt beside Lily again, gently placing her hand on the girl's forehead. Her skin was clammy, her pulse dangerously slow. Amelia didn't have the luxury of time. She had to stabilize Lily here and now. With what little she had, that was the only way forward. Elena, Amelia said softly, I'm going to need your help. I can't do this alone. For a long moment, Elena didn't move. Then, with a reluctant sigh, she nodded, kneeling beside Amelia. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was enough for now. And with that, Amelia went to work, knowing that every second counted. Amelia's hands moved swiftly, adjusting Lily's position and checking her vital signs again. Her pulse was growing weaker by the minute, and every breath was labored shallow. As she leaned closer to examine the bruising on Lily's arms, the sense of déjà vu became overwhelming. She had seen this before, on Elena's son. The same unexplained bruising, the same weakness, the same terrifying decline. Her mind raced back to those final days, when she had watched helplessly as the boy slipped away, despite every test and treatment they had tried. She had stood by his bedside, racking her brain for something, anything that could save him. But there had been no answers, just the slow, inevitable end. Now, years later, the same mystery illness was claiming Lily. Amelia's throat tightened as she stood up, pacing the room. She needed to clear her head, to think rationally, but it was impossible with the weight of the past pressing down on her. It was happening all over again. Another child was slipping through her fingers, and she was powerless to stop it. Elena, I need you to tell me more about what the doctor said, Amelia said, her voice strained as she turned back to the distraught mother. Did they do any specific tests? Were there any signs of improvement, even for a short time? Elena crossed her arms, her face a mask of anger and frustration. The doctors did everything. They ran tests, gave her medication, but nothing worked. Just like nothing worked with him. Amelia winced at the bitter edge in Elena's voice, but she pressed on. What about the symptoms? When did they start? Right after she got that fever, Elena replied, her voice breaking slightly. Just like him. It started with a fever, then the bruising, then she got weaker and weaker. Amelia clenched her fists, her mind racing. The fever. That was where it had all begun with the boy, too. But what was causing it? What had she missed back then? And what was she missing now? She glanced at Lily's frail body, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin. There was something more here, something hidden. She had to find it, or Lily would end up just like Elena's son. "Elena," Amelia said, her voice firm but quiet, "I think this might be the same illness. Whatever it is, it's rare, and it's dangerous. But if we act fast, we might still have a chance." Elena's eyes flashed with anger. "A chance? You said that before." Amelia met her gaze, refusing to look away. "I know, but I can't give up. Not this time." Elena stood frozen, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Amelia thought she might push back, reject her help once more. But then, slowly, Elena nodded. "Do what you need to do," Elena said quietly, the fight in her voice fading. Amelia turned back to Lily, her mind racing. She had to figure this out, and she had to do it fast. Amelia could feel the pressure mounting, tightening around her like a vice. Every second that passed brought Lily closer to the edge, and Amelia was running out of options. She knelt beside the girl again, her heart pounding as she considered the steps she would have to take. The symptoms were clear, but the cause remained elusive. Lily's breathing grew more erratic, and the bruises on her arms darkened with each passing minute. Amelia's medical instincts screamed at her to get to a hospital, to run more tests, but Elena had made it clear. There was no going back to the hospital. Whatever hope Lily had rested solely in Amelia's hands, here and now. "I need to reduce her fever," Amelia murmured to herself, thinking out loud as she grabbed a cold compress from her medical kit. But that was only a temporary solution. It wouldn't address the underlying problem. She glanced around the room, her mind racing through possible solutions. With no proper equipment, her options were painfully limited. She was essentially flying blind, with nothing but her experience and her instincts to guide her. And those instincts told her she was running out of time. Amelia turned to Elena, who had been watching in tense silence. "I need you to keep her calm. Talk to her. Hold her hand. Anything to soothe her." Elena hesitated, but eventually moved to Lily's side, gently taking her daughter's small hand in hers. "You hear that, baby? You're going to be okay. Just stay with us, okay?" Amelia felt a pang in her chest as she watched the scene unfold. It was so familiar, too familiar. She had seen this before, with Elena's son, the mother's hope, the doctor's desperation, the looming shadow of death. The weight of the past pressed down harder, threatening to suffocate her. But she couldn't afford to lose focus. "Not now, Amelia." Elena's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Amelia turned to face her. "What is it?" If she doesn't make it," Elena paused, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I'll do. I can't lose her, too." Amelia's throat tightened. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she had the power to stop it. "I'm doing everything I can," Amelia said quietly, her voice steady but full of unspoken fear. "But I need you to be strong for her. She's still fighting." Elena nodded, though tears brimmed in her eyes. She leaned down, whispering words of comfort to Lily, as if trying to will her back to life. Amelia turned her attention back to the task at hand. She needed to take desperate measures, and that meant risking everything. She reached into her bag, pulling out the last vial of medication she had with her. It wasn't ideal. It was untested for this particular condition, but it might be the only thing that could pull Lily back from the brink. She hesitated for only a moment before preparing the injection. This was her last shot. If it didn't work, there would be nothing left to do. "Elena, I need you to trust me," Amelia said, holding the syringe in her hand. "This is our best chance." Elena looked at her, fear and doubt warring in her expression. But she nodded, her grip tightening on Lily's hand. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself. Then, with a swift motion, she administered the injection. For a moment, the world stood still. Amelia held her breath, waiting for a sign, any sign, that the treatment was working. But nothing happened. The room was silent, save for the faint sound of Lily's labored breaths. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Lily's breathing began to stabilize. Amelia exhaled slowly, relief flooding her system. But she wasn't out of the woods yet. The medication had bought them time, but it wasn't a cure. It was a stopgap, a desperate measure to keep the girl alive long enough to find the real solution. "She's stabilizing," Amelia said softly, glancing at Elena. "But we're not done. Not by a long shot." Elena's expression softened, though her fear remained. "What now?" Amelia stood, her mind already racing ahead. "Now we figure out what's really going on." Amelia sat on the cold floor beside Lily's bed, her mind racing as the room fell into an uneasy quiet. The initial relief of Lily's stabilization was fleeting. There was still too much left unanswered. Amelia knew that what she had done was a temporary measure at best. The root cause of this mysterious illness was still unknown, and without a clear diagnosis, Lily was still in danger. "Elena," Amelia said, her voice steady but urgent, "I need to know more about what's happened to Lily in the last few months. Was there anything unusual, any changes in her environment, her diet?" Elena shook her head, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Nothing changed. We've been living in the same place, doing the same things. I've taken her to every doctor I could find, but no one had answers." Amelia frowned, her mind spinning. There had to be something she was missing, something that connected this case to the one she had failed all those years ago. Her thoughts drifted back to the boy, Elena's son. His final days had been marked by the same symptoms: the bruising, the fever, the sudden collapse. But what had caused it? "I need you to think carefully," Amelia pressed, refusing to let herself sink into hopelessness. Even the smallest detail could help. Elena rubbed her eyes, frustration mingling with grief. "It's like I said before, Doctor. Nothing has changed. She was fine until one day she wasn't. Just like with him." Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to push through the mental fog. The similarities between the two cases were too strong to be a coincidence. But what had she missed all those years ago? She suddenly stood, pacing the room. There's something here, something connecting them. Both of them got sick after fever. Both had the same unexplained bruising, the same rapid decline. Her voice trailed off as a realization hit her. The bruises. She remembered that with Elena's son, the doctors had speculated about a possible blood disorder, but none of the tests had confirmed it. It was a dead end at the time. But now, could be the same? "Elena," Amelia said, her voice low and urgent. "Did anyone in your family ever suffer from any kind of blood disorder? Any history of clotting issues or anemia?" Elena blinked, surprised by the question. "Not that I know of, but my grandmother, she was sick for a long time, and no one ever figured out why. They said it was some kind of weakness in her blood." Amelia's breath caught. That might be it. There could be a genetic factor at play here, something that went undiagnosed in your family, and now it's affecting your children. Elena's face paled. "You think this is my fault?" "No," Amelia said quickly, "but it's a clue. If it's genetic, we may be able to figure out what's causing this and how to treat it." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in hours, Amelia felt a sliver of hope. But that hope was quickly overshadowed by the weight of the past. If this was indeed a genetic condition, then she had failed to catch it before. She had failed Elena's son, and now, Amelia's stomach churned. She needed to act fast before history repeated itself. The old building's walls seemed to close in around them, the air thick with tension. Amelia felt her heart pounding in her chest as the realization settled in. She had to take a risk, a dangerous, potentially life-threatening risk. But there was no other option. "Elena," Amelia said carefully, "I think I know what's happening, but I need to confirm it. There's a test I can do, but it's not without risk." Elena's eyes widened, a mix of fear and hope flickering across her face. "What kind of risk?" Amelia hesitated for a moment. "If I'm right, and this is a genetic blood disorder, the test will give us answers. But if Lily's condition is too far advanced, it could cause complications." "What kind of complications?" Elena's voice cracked, her hands trembling as she gripped Lily's hand tighter. Amelia exhaled slowly. "It could make her worse. Her body is already weak, and any stress might push her beyond her limits." Elena's face contorted in pain. And if we don't do it? If we don't, she might not survive the night, Amelia said bluntly, her voice tight. She hated how cold the words sounded, but she couldn't afford to sugarcoat the truth. Elena looked down at her daughter, her hand gently stroking Lily's hair. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, the room was filled with nothing but the quiet, steady hum of Lily's shallow breathing. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Do it. I can't lose her. Amelia nodded, her stomach twisting with anxiety. She prepared the necessary equipment, her hands trembling slightly as she assembled the makeshift test kit. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was all she had. She couldn't afford to think about what might go wrong. She had to focus on what needed to be done. Elena, I need you to hold her still, Amelia instructed, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside her. This will be over quickly. Elena knelt beside Lily, whispering soft words of comfort as Amelia inserted the needle, drawing a small sample of blood. The silence in the room was oppressive, every breath heavy with tension. As soon as she had a sample, Amelia got to work, using the limited tools she had on hand to run the test. Time seemed to stretch as she waited for the results, her mind racing through the possibilities. If she was right, they might have a fighting chance. But if she was wrong, no. She couldn't think like that. She had to stay focused. The results came in, and Amelia's heart sank. It was worse than she had expected. Lily's blood was showing severe abnormalities. Her body wasn't clotting properly, and her blood cell counts were dangerously low. It confirmed Amelia's worst fear, a rare genetic blood disorder, likely inherited from Elena's family. Amelia looked up at Elena, her face grim. It's what I feared. Lily's blood isn't clotting the way it should, and her red blood cells are breaking down too fast. Her body is essentially shutting down. Elena paled, her breath catching in her throat. What can we do? Amelia swallowed hard, knowing what she had to say next. We need to get her to a hospital immediately. She needs a transfusion, specialized care. I can stabilize her here for a few more hours, but after that, I can't guarantee anything. Elena's face twisted in anguish, but she nodded. Then we go, whatever it takes. Amelia breathed a sigh of relief, though the tension in her chest didn't fade. They were running out of time, and the road ahead would be dangerous, both for Lily and for Amelia's fragile sense of redemption. As she prepared to move Lily, a thought crossed her mind. This might be her only chance to make things right. She had already sacrificed so much, but she knew that redemption wouldn't come without a cost. If she could save Lily, maybe she could finally forgive herself for the past. But first, they had to survive the night. The night outside was pitch black as Amelia and Elena carried Lily through the crumbling hallways of the abandoned building. Every step felt like a race against time, the weight of the situation pressing down on them with every labored breath Lily took. Amelia's mind was focused, calculating the best way to get Lily to a hospital without losing her along the way. Elena, we need to keep her as still as possible. Any sudden movements could cause internal bleeding, Amelia instructed, her voice tense. The genetic blood disorder had already compromised Lily's ability to clot, and her condition was fragile. Too fragile. Elena nodded, her face pale but determined. I'll do whatever it takes. They reached the exit, the cold night air biting against Amelia's skin as they stepped outside. The streets were eerily quiet, and Amelia's car sat parked under a flickering street lamp. She quickly opened the back door, laying Lily down on the back seat as gently as possible. I'm going to drive as carefully as I can, but we need to move fast, Amelia said, her hands shaking as she slid into the driver's seat. Elena climbed in beside Lily, never letting go of her daughter's hand. Please don't let her die. Amelia clenched her jaw, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't let it happen. Not again. The car roared to life, and Amelia took off down the empty streets, her mind racing as fast as the car. Every bump, every turn felt like it could be Lily's last, and the tension in the air was suffocating. She couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of déjà vu. This was just like before, racing against time to save a life. But this time, it was different. It had to be different. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as they approached the hospital. The glow of the emergency room lights felt like a beacon of hope, but it was tinged with the memory of her last failure. She remembered bringing Elena's son here, desperate to save him, only to watch him slip away despite her best efforts. She couldn't let that happen to Lily. Amelia parked the car, rushing out to grab a nearby nurse. "We need immediate help. The girl in the car, she's critical." Within moments, a team of doctors and nurses had surrounded the car, carefully transferring Lily to a stretcher. Amelia watched as they wheeled her inside, her stomach twisting with fear. This was out of her hands now. All she could do was wait. Elena stood beside her, her face etched with worry. "Do you think they can save her?" Amelia didn't answer right away. She wanted to say yes, but the truth was she didn't know. They have the resources here. They'll do everything they can. But the uncertainty hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Inside the hospital, Amelia and Elena waited in silence, the minutes dragging on painfully. Amelia felt the weight of every decision she had made, every choice that had led them here. She had fought as hard as she could. But was it enough? Hours passed. The hospital was a blur of activity, but for Amelia and Elena, time felt frozen. They sat in the waiting room, each lost in their thoughts. Amelia's mind wandered back to the moment when she had promised Elena that her son would live. She had been so sure, so confident that she could save him. And when he had died, that confidence had shattered into a million pieces. She had never forgiven herself. The doors to the emergency room opened, and a doctor walked out, his face unreadable. Amelia stood up, her heart in her throat, and Elena followed suit, gripping her hands together tightly. "Doctor." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. The doctor looked at both women, then spoke. "Lily is stable. She's not out of the woods yet, but she's responding well to the treatment. We're preparing her for a transfusion now. She has a rare blood disorder, but with the right care, we believe she can recover." Elena let out a sob, her legs giving out beneath her as she sank into a nearby chair. Amelia felt the tightness in her chest release, though it wasn't completely gone. Lily had a chance. They had made it through the night, but it wasn't over yet. "Thank you," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. Amelia stood in silence, the relief washing over her like a wave. But beneath that relief was a deep sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. She had saved Lily, but the cost had been steep. The guilt, the fear, the endless second-guessing, all of it had taken its toll. But she had done it. This time, she had kept her promise. As the hours passed, the tension in the waiting room slowly dissipated. Nurses came and went, updating Elena on Lily's progress. Amelia stayed by Elena's side, but her mind was already beginning to process everything that had happened. She had sacrificed so much to save Lily, and though the journey wasn't over, she knew that something had shifted inside her. For the first time in years, Amelia felt the weight of her past begin to lift. She had faced her deepest fear, failing again, and she had come through the other side. Maybe, just maybe, she could start to forgive herself. Elena turned to her, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "You did it. You saved her." Amelia shook her head, her voice soft. "No, Elena, we did it." The two women shared a moment of quiet understanding. Their relationship, once filled with anger and pain, had transformed into something else. There was still sadness, still the memory of what had been lost, but there was also a sense of peace. They had both fought for Lily, and in doing so, they had found some small measure of healing. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft glow through the hospital windows, Amelia stood up. She looked at Elena one last time, offering a small, tired smile. "I need to go," Amelia said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "But I'll check in later." Elena nodded, her expression one of gratitude and understanding. Amelia walked out of the hospital, the cool morning air brushing against her skin. She breathed in deeply, feeling the first real sense of calm she had felt in years. There was still a long road ahead for both her and for Lily, but for the first time, Amelia believed that she had the strength to face it. She had kept her promise, and maybe, just maybe, she had found her redemption. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more content like this. I'd love to hear from you. What part of a story had the biggest impact on you? Was it the tension, the emotional journey, or something else? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any story ideas or suggestions for themes you'd like to see next, drop them in the comments as well. I'm always looking for new inspiration, and your feedback could be the foundation for the next big story on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.